And this is true, but it's only part of the picture, and the complete picture is much more complex and much more interesting. For example, when you think of economic prosperity, it didn't extend to a significant part of the population. Many rural areas and many working people were not at all prosperous. The period was marked by considerable prejudice and discrimination against minorities, particularly against Blacks, against Jews, against immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe, and to an extent it's hard to recognize today, against Catholics. There was a culture war between permissive urban America and the more traditional rural America. We're going to consider a number of incidents which illustrate these trends. Prohibition, the Scopes trial, the revival of the Ku Klux Klan outside of the South, where it was much more an anti-Catholic, an anti-immigrant, and anti-Semitic group than an anti-Black group. We're going to consider the restrictive immigration legislation which was passed, which basically cut off immigration. We're going to consider the anti-Semitism highlighted by Henry Ford, and we're going to consider the start of the Great Migration of Blacks from the South to the other parts of America. For the 1930s, certainly there was a Great Depression. We'll be considering in detail the programs, varying experimental programs of the New Deal to end the Depression and to aid those who were affected by it. An overriding point is that these measures helped, but they were never fully successful, and unemployment remained at 10% or more until the start of World War II. The last class will be devoted to U.S. foreign and security policy during the years before World War II, and the takeaway from this is how strong the isolationist movement was during the 1930s and how much opposition there was to getting us involved in wars in Europe. In fact, in 1941, shortly before Pearl Harbor, when the Nazi Germany had gotten to the gates of Moscow, the issue of renewal of the draft in the United States came up, and it only passed by one vote with a lot of parliamentary maneuvering required to do that. So overall, this should be, to me, it's been a very interesting period to examine, partly because I have personal impressions of it from popular culture and because my parents and grandparents lived through it. And it's very interesting to compare these personal impressions with what historians have come up with. So I found it very interesting putting this course together, and I hope many of you will join me in it. Thank you.
Good morning. For most of the 13 years that I have taught for Encore Learning, my Civil War classes have focused on the conflict in the Eastern theater of operations between the Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia. The cast of characters are usually George Brenton McClellan, George Gordon Meade, Winfield Scott Hancock, Robert E. Lee, Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson, and Richard Ewell, just to name a few. This current class will be on Civil War in the West, which will introduce a whole new cast of characters for you to learn about. Fellows like Don Carlos Buell, William Stark Rosecrans, William J. Hardee, Patrick R. Claiborne, and Leonidas Polk, just to name a few. Most notably, there are people who have been in both the Western and Eastern theater. Ulysses S. Grant, Philip H. Sheridan, John Bell Hood, and James Longstreet, just to name a few. The Western theater operations in 1860 covered the area between the Allegheny Mountains and the Mississippi River. West of the Mississippi River was called the Trans-Mississippi. theater, and we will not be studying that at all. Just the area between the Allegheny Mountains and the Mississippi River. And that's going to encompass most of the Deep South states that were the first to secede. I hope to see you on Zoom on September the 17th, Thursday. Thank you very much.
Course on Carthage and Roman North Africa. Tom?
This course is a course that I've taught before, but don't be put off by that because there are new digs in Carthage and North Africa all the time, just as there are all around. The course is 10 sessions, each one 2 hours, starting on September 25th and ending on December 4th, none on Thanksgiving week. It's on Fridays at 1 to 3 p.m., page 19 of the catalog. It is concerned with Carthage and Roman North Africa. And we should remember that the Romans actually held North Africa a lot longer than the Carthaginian Empire did. And so we will start with the various sources that we have from this period. We'll look at the geography and prehistory of North Africa. And we'll look a little bit at the Phoenicians, who were the source of Carthage. And the Carthaginians came from Phoenicia. And when the Phoenicians were conquered by the Assyrians, it cut Carthage loose, and Carthage pretty much took over the Western Mediterranean. This impinged on Roman desires and ambitions, and they started to fight over various territories, starting the First Punic War in Sicily. And then after that, they went on to the Second Punic War, which was Hannibal crossing the Alps and running around Italy for about 15 or 20 years, until he finally was pretty much abandoned by Carthage. And Carthage itself was more interested in ending the war and having trade. This didn't make Hannibal very happy. He ended up going back to Carthage, and the Romans chased him back to Carthage and fought the final battle of the Second Punic War in North Africa. Hannibal lost, but then the Romans put him in charge of Carthage. Strange. After the Second Punic War, there was a period of about 20 years during which there was peace. Hannibal eventually had to flee because he was abandoned once again by his own people. And he was chased down by the Romans and eventually committed suicide. The Third Punic War was just Rome deciding to destroy Carthage, destroy the city of Carthage. There had been reparations and treaty requirements on Carthage that they demilitarize. And when a group of Romans went down to check on it and to make demands on Carthage, they asked the Carthaginians to turn over all their weapons. Well, the Carthaginians, it turned out, turned over more than 20,000 sets of arms and armaments and armor. This convinced the Romans that they hadn't really demilitarized. So the Romans actually went in and just pretty much destroyed Carthage, burnt it to the ground, and then shaved off the top of it, the Bursa Hill, and built their own city on top of it over a period of years. And that lasted then for another 700 or 800 years until the Islamic conquest. So we're going to look at Roman Carthage in the second half of the course, and then Christian Carthage, as it was very Christianized, eventually taken over by barbarians, but the barbarians were Christian too, but they were a different kind of Christians. And so then the Christians started killing each other off in North Africa, and we will kind of end the course with that. There will be 2 movies shown in this course, one of which is a movie that was put together by Mussolini It is surprisingly accurate on the conquest of Carthage, but there was no political correctness. The elephants that show up in the movie were actually killed in the movie, just for realism. The second movie is the last session of the course, the 10th session. It's called Jupiter's Darling. It's comedy. And this is something to get us off all the bad things we've seen before. That's my presentation, and I hope you'll all join me. Once again, this is a repeat of a previous course that was taught about 8 years ago, but a lot has happened since then.